Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to this special live edition of Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. We are less than 6 months away from one of the most consequential elections in the state's history, with voters not only deciding the next president, but major constitutional amendments on both abortion and the legalization of marijuana. This morning, we have the newly released results of a major poll from CBS News in Florida, and I am joined here by my colleague and friend, Eliott Rodriguez, so we can go through the results. And in a few minutes, we'll also be joined by CBS News pollster extraordinaire, Anthony Salvanto. But Eliott, let's start with some of the top-line numbers on this. First, the presidential matchup. As you can see, Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden among likely voters by 9 points. Eliott, this is just reinforces the notion that Florida is no longer a swing state.
Absolutely, Jim. If you had any doubt that Florida is Trump country, you can forget about it. Florida voters think that Donald Trump does a better job of handling the economy. They also think he has the mental, cognitive health to serve as president, and they think they were better off when Donald Trump was in the White House.
You know, Democrats were really hoping that having abortion and marijuana on the ballot would really change things and make Florida more competitive, but let's look at those numbers quickly. In our survey, the constitutional amendment to protect a woman's ability to have an abortion is at 60% in favor right now, with 20% opposed and 19% undecided. Eliott, that is good news to supporters of the amendment, because they start in a very strong position 6 months out from the election.
Yeah, and when you dig into the numbers, I know you have, you'd be surprised. A lot of Trump supporters, a lot of hardcore Republicans are also okay with allowing for recreational marijuana.
It is fascinating how things just sort of get blurred. And let's give those marijuana numbers real quick. And with marijuana right now is at 56% currently supported, 30% opposed, and 14% undecided. Just a reminder, you have to get 60% of the vote to pass. So even that number looks good for the folks who want to legalize marijuana for anyone 21 and above in that. Okay, there's a lot to get into in this, and I want to bring in Anthony Salvanto now, the election survey director for CBS News, whose team at the network do such an amazing job. Anthony, I want to dig a little deeper into the issues that Democrats were really hoping that abortion would change things here in the state, but it doesn't look to be that case, is it?
Hey there, Jim. Great to talk to you. So, look, let's unpack that just a little bit. One of the things that you look at, and you mentioned this a little bit at the top, is that, yes, Democrats are in favor of abortion being legal in all or most cases. But you also see this number of Republicans, 4 in 10, who also feel that way about the issue. And what that does is it then boosts in turn support for the amendment. But the key is these Republicans, they're all still voting for Donald Trump. So that's why, one reason why there's that difference between the Joe Biden numbers and the abortion and the abortion amendment support numbers, Jim.
And Anthony, when you look at the major issues voters care about, the economy and inflation are far and away the most important ones, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right, and that's another big reason. So take a look at this. The economy and the inflation are a major factor for more than 8 in 10 voters. And frankly, this is the case in Florida. This is the case in every state that we poll in this election, right? But you compare that to abortion, which is down here. It is important, but it is particularly important for Democrats. It doesn't have that top of mind aspect for all voters. So that's one part of it, Eliott. And the other part of it is this. If you look at the current law, which we asked about, you had a majority saying they feel it's too strict. What's important about amendments is that oftentimes they are seen in context of what the current situation is. So if you have a majority saying the current situation is too strict, that also underpins some of the support then going forward to change things or for that amendment, Eliott.
You know, Anthony, I was digging eagerly into the crosstabs this morning because I'm nerdy that way, and I kind of like looking at crosstabs. And one of the things I thought was interesting, just to dig a little deeper on whether or not abortion was truly going to be a motivating factor for folks, I found that only in your survey, 43% say that abortion makes them more motivated to vote in a presidential race. And marijuana, we talked about that a little before, only 34% say that's a major motivating factor. So the two areas that Democrats, had pinned their hopes on, getting young people for marijuana, getting women out to vote on abortion, while they're important, they're not, as you're pointing out there for the major concerns, they're not the driving factors in this presidential campaign.
I think one of the ways to look at that is, does it take a marginal voter, which is to say a voter who is less frequently at the polls, and get them motivated to turn out, which would reshape the electorate? Right now, what you see is a lot of the likely voters here are people who have voted before. But I think that's one key dynamic then to watch in the campaign going forward. And let me show you this as well, because it speaks to what the Biden campaign or the Democrats may try to do and what we'll watch, right? We asked, if he wins, what do you think Donald Trump would do with regard to abortion? And you get this 40% here, this sizable number, who say that they believe Donald Trump would leave abortion up to the states, right? Whereas you get this third that believe that he would try to pass a national abortion ban to make it illegal nationwide. So what does that mean? It means that the implications of the vote, in this case for Donald Trump, are not extending beyond that Democratic base. And that's something that I think is an argument that the Biden campaign will try to make. And these are numbers that I think we'll watch then in Florida for the next 6 months, Jim.
Eliott, just real briefly before I bring you in, again, looking at the crosstabs, getting into the nitty-gritty of it. On that one graphic that you've got in front of you before, well, the one before about how abortion is too strict, 29% of conservatives also believe that the 6-week abortion ban is too strict. That is fascinating to me, how there is general recognition. Really, the 6-week abortion ban truly was DeSantis and Republicans playing to the base of the base. I think that's the phrase you used when we were talking about this before. It's really going after the hardest of the hard, but it does not represent Florida overall.
I think that this is, in context, something that we have seen in other states as well. So it is a pattern. In other places, take, for example, Ohio, just a few months ago, where abortion referendums or changing a constitution to allow a right to abortion have passed. What you've seen is that there is a segment of conservatives, I showed you that 4 in 10 Republicans a moment ago, who do say that there should be at least some access available. Not necessarily all cases, but at least some. So it's the particulars of the law there that really matter. And yes, you do see that sizable, not always a majority, who would support it among the Republican Party. And yes, I agree with you. It's very different when you're talking about a Republican primary. There you're talking about a much more ideological electorate than when you get to the larger electorate, which is what we're talking about today, Jim.
Yeah, what's fascinating to me is that the viewpoint of Floridians seems to be in line with what they believe Donald Trump stands for, which is that the states should have a say in abortion, ignoring the fact that Democrats would argue that it was Donald Trump who appointed the Supreme Court justices that reversed Roe v. Wade.
Well, yeah, Ellie, and let me show you this, speaking to your point, okay? We asked, how do you connect Donald Trump to the overturn of Roe v. Wade? Do you give him credit? A lot of people on the conservative side do. Do you give him blame? But look at this number that's for neither, right? You got half the electorate that says they neither credit him nor blame, which means he's not connected to it in their minds. This is another number I think you watch if the Biden campaign is going to try to move the needle here. That's one, because if he's not connected to it and he's not necessarily blamed for it, for people who would have abortion be illegal, then that's a gap that they would need to fill, Eliott.
It certainly is.
Anthony, there's so many things that just seem incongruous, though. You know, you have Floridians thinking that the economy in their state is better than it is nationally, but yet Joe Biden doesn't do well here. You have Democrats and Floridians overall supporting abortion rights, but not holding it against Donald Trump. It really does seem as if there is almost two mindsets on some of these issues, where at the end of the day, when you get to the top of the ballot, whether it's president or U.S. Senate or whatever it might be, party identification is far more important than actually the policies or the issues or the stances that they've taken in the past.
Jim, you know, as we've talked about many times, welcome to modern politics. Partisanship really explains more than 90% of the voting these days. We see more and more straight line balloting. We see more and more people who just are going with whatever their party affiliation is. And that also comes out in the polling when people talk about the nature of things. Sometimes if their person is in the White House, they just feel better overall about the economy than if somebody from the other party is in the White House. And yes, that is part of it. Let me, though, add this wrinkle, which is very personal, okay? You get a majority right now who feel Joe Biden's policies would make them financially worse off. So to your point about the difference between, yes, Florida's economy is seen as doing better than the national, when you get down to an even more micro level, to the personal, people tell us that they've been hard hit by inflation, and this is what's coming out of that. And they're holding Joe Biden at least responsible for that part of it, and that's one of the things that's a drag on him, whereas they're recalling the Trump years very favorably in a lot of our polling, and that means they're associating him with being financially better off, Jim.
You know, Anthony, one thing that I found very, very interesting is something that Jim showed me in the tabs is that Floridians, while they say, oh, we feel our economy here in Florida is better than the national economy, they also at the same time say, we hate all these outsiders that are moving into Florida and making our state unaffordable. That sentiment is very strong, isn't it?
It is indeed, and it's something that affects, in their minds, it affects things like the price of housing, right? And it affects things like how, with like their resources, and in their minds, what they're paying for goods. Obviously, Florida has been one of the fastest growing states in the country. So it's really interesting to see this, because one of the dynamics that made Florida so attractive for so many people, forgive me, moving in, is now they're looking at that and saying, hold on a second, it's becoming harder and harder to afford. It's a dynamic we see, frankly, not just in Florida, but in a lot of the Sun Belt, in Arizona, in other fast-growing states as well. So that is certainly something that puts the local vote into perspective here. Having said that, the presidency is often a national vote, and so the dynamic there in their minds will be a little different, Eliott.
Anthony, I want to go back to the marijuana issue for a second, because obviously that's another major ballot measure that we're going to see. Which right now is, your poll shows it's at 56%, with about 30% opposed and 14 undecided, if I'm remembering off the top of my head. The assumption is that it's going to be young people that really drive that number, but I think it's interesting. We can't forget those baby boomers who grew up around marijuana and are eager to get back to those heady days, so to speak.
Exactly. I mean, there's a bit of a, it's stereotype, if you will, in that assumption that a lot of people make. Wait, this is motivating for young people. Well, look, frankly, it is. You see a lot of support for this, especially among younger people. But baby boomers, if you look at those crosstabs like you were talking about, the baby boom generation is strongly supportive as well. In fact, it's really only folks who are over 65 who are just split. So even there, you don't get entirely opposition. Again, for context, we see this here in Florida, but we've seen this around the country where states have voted to legalize in some form marijuana. And so, yes, as the demographics switch, as the demographics change, you definitely see higher numbers in support, but it really cuts across the generations there, Jim.
And both of those issues, marijuana and abortion, those constitutional amendments look pretty safe, like they would pass 56%. Approving of the legalization of marijuana, recreational marijuana, when you need 60% for a constitutional amendment to become law, right?
Right. Well, one of the things that is important whenever you're looking at these ballot measures is that there's a long way to go. And I know we always just sort of say that 6 months out, but you also see a lot of people, even in our polling, when we ask them, have you heard a lot about it? The answer for many is that they have not. And what happens is, as these campaigns gear up, people will start paying more attention, people will get more information, and I would not be surprised at all if a lot of these numbers move around for the next 6 months, because, look, unlike partisanship, which we talked about as being so firm and holding fast, these kinds of things can have much more variance as the campaign goes along, Eliott.
Anthony, as always, I'm so appreciative of everything you and your team there at the network does when it comes to this polling. It's very, very valuable information. And thank you for getting up with us this morning. We'll be picking through all of this for coming days, and we'll talk to you more about it as it goes. But I, again, want to just thank you for coming on. All right. When we come back, we will hear from both the chair of the Florida Republican Party and the chair of the Florida Democratic Party about our poll results. Stay with us. Welcome back to this special live edition of Facing South Florida. I'm here with my colleague and friend Eliott Rodriguez, and we've been breaking down the results of a major new poll by CBS News here in Florida. That shows that Donald Trump with a 9-point lead over Joe Biden, but it also shows the constitutional amendment to protect a woman's right to have an abortion currently polling at 60%, and the marijuana amendment polling just short of the required 60% mark at 56%. All right, we've been talking about it with Anthony Salvanto. Now joining us is the chair of the Florida Democratic Party, Nikki Fried. Nikki, you've had a little time to look at the results. It would seem that while the abortion issue is doing well in Florida, it's not helping Joe Biden or other Democrats on the ballot.
Well, first of all, Jim, thanks for having me on this morning. You know, polls 6 months out are never a predicative of what is actually going to happen on the day of elections. But we as Democrats know we've got a lot of work to do. And I think what's happened, first of all, a majority of Floridians don't know that the 6-week abortion ban is on the books today. And so the second that we start hearing the more and more stories of just heartbreaking stories of what is going to happen here in Florida the next couple of months, we are going to be able to show, one, that 60% number is going to go way above that, but also reminding people Donald Trump did this. He stacked the court, and now he's bragging about it. And we put those two links together, that the only way that a woman's right to choose is going to be protected in the country is, one, putting it back into the Florida Constitution, but also making sure that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are reelected.
Nikki, I was at an event the other day and ran into a lady who I've known for years, and we just were casually discussing, well, we got elections coming up and abortions on the ballot, and she right away started telling me her personal story of what it was like before Roe v. Wade. And I felt like she wanted to get that story out because she feels like people really don't understand what it was like in those days. Are you seeing more and more of that?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually started a campaign with our seniors last week to tell those stories. You know, I talk to my grandmother and my mom all the time, the heartbreaking stories that I hear from them. I've been very public that my dad's mother had an abortion, had to go to Cuba, and had scars for the rest of her life. These type of stories of a pre-Roe time is going to keep coming up, and our seniors, the ones who fought so hard for Roe v. Wade, are going to be back in the trenches telling the stories, but not only those stories, but the immediacy of what is happening here in the state of Florida. And so when you start getting all of these stories being told, the pre-Roe and the current status here in the state of Florida, and that who is to blame? It is Donald Trump, it is Ron DeSantis, and it's every Republican here in the state of Florida who voted for the 6-week abortion ban. And when this was polled back during the 2023 legislative session, 77% of Floridians thought this ban, 6 weeks, was too extreme. And as soon as more and more Floridians start hearing what's going on and more money is being spent on getting out the vote and taking this message to the voters, we're going to see a drastic impact on both the top of the ticket, but also, more importantly, the bottom of the ticket.
Here's the problem that you have right now based on the polling that we've seen today. The abortion issue is not sticking to Donald Trump. They do not blame Trump for the overturn of Roe versus Wade, though it's clear in the numbers here. They also believe that Donald Trump will leave things to the states. So they're fine with that. So Donald Trump and his campaign has done a very, very good and effective job of distancing himself from the Roe versus Wade decision and things like the 6-week abortion ban. And Democrats have failed to be able to really tie him to that. I don't see how you change that in the next few months.
You know, and you're right, Jim, you know, that right now people are blaming 6 weeks on Ron DeSantis, but we had to get here to be able to pass it, which means it is Donald Trump. And that's the work that we have to do. You know, the campaign for the ballot initiative hasn't started putting money on the ground. They haven't been talking to voters. We've got 6 months to change this narrative. It's going to take work. It's going to take money. It's going to take resources. But I do believe by the time people get their ballots in the mail, are going to early voting and day of, there will be no doubt who is responsible for the current moment that we are living in. It is the Republicans, it is Donald Trump, it is Ron DeSantis, and it's the Republican legislature.
I'm going to give you one other number that when I dig deeper into the poll, and this number actually shocked me. Abortion may impact you or your family directly, right? That was the question. Only 5% of women answered that question yes. Majority say that it's more of about the principle. But I think that what that shows is that there has not been that connection yet where men or women, particularly women, feel that this issue is going to be affecting them personally.
Yeah, that's part of the messaging that we're going to have to do. And it's not just personally, the decision that me, myself, and I have to make. You know, it is more so just the democracy, the aspect of freedom, the taking away of a woman's right to choose that has been enshrined in our laws, you know, for 50 plus years. But it's also about making the connection that this has an economic impact. I talk to so many families that are my age, that their kids are juniors and seniors in high school, and now don't want to stay in a Florida school. And so now these middle-class families who have been doing their part to save up for their kids to go to in-state tuition are now having to make a decision.
Nikki, let me just jump in because I should have read this earlier. We do have a statement from Evan Power, your counterpart of the Republican Party of Florida, to the poll. As we have seen previously, the most important issues facing Floridians are the economy, inflation, and immigration. All things Joe Biden and Democrats have failed to lead on. Democrats can keep making this election about the same failed manufactured issues they have used in the past to their own detriment. We are going to win Florida and win it big. I'll give you a chance to comment on that before we wrap up.
I laugh at every aspect of that. First of all, the fact that women are going to die is a manufactured issue shows how disconnected that the Republican Party is in the state of Florida. And when it comes to the economy, Joe Biden has reduced inflation. The prices of food are going down. We are seeing every single month overperforming on the jobs being produced. The Dow hit an all-time high of over 40,000 this year. The reason why Floridians right now haven't been feeling any of that is because Ron DeSantis and Republicans have refused to take money down, whether it's for the infrastructure money, for the Inflation Reduction Act, whether it's feeding
Nikki, I'm up against a break. I apologize. We'll have you back. We'll talk more.
Good.
Nikki, right. Thank you.
We'll be right back after the break.
All right.
There's a lot more to our poll that we will be unveiling over the next couple of days.
Tonight at 11, we asked Florida voters about concerns they have over the mental fitness of Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And tomorrow, we dig into the economic issues that are driving this year's election. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact us at jdefede@cbs.com.
Yeah, that's me.
That's you.
Contact me. Yes. I do enjoy hearing from you. Thanks for joining us. Eliott, always a pleasure.
My pleasure.
All right. Take care. Have a good day.